In the far-flung future of the 41st millennium, the war-torn galaxy is a realm of perpetual conflict, where vast armies clash in endless struggle across countless battlefields. Among the myriad of weapons used by the forces of humanity, one stands as a symbol of power, destruction, and terror: the mighty Titan. These colossal war machines, towering over 100 meters in height, are the ultimate weapon in the arsenal of the Adeptus Mechanicus, the Imperium of man's technological priesthood. These colossal engines of destruction are piloted by the Princeps, elite warriors whose souls are bound to the Titan's machine spirit through a unique symbiotic link. Their minds meld with the Titan, and in this union, the Princeps becomes the heart and soul of the war machine. It is a bond that transcends the boundaries of man and machine, a relationship that can be both empowering and devastating. To understand the life of a Titan pilot is to understand the unrelenting struggle between human will and the overpowering force of the machine. The Princeps and their Titans are not simply soldiers. They are the apex of imperial might, the living embodiment of the Emperor's will in battle, and the epitome of sacrifice and duty. Their lives are intertwined with the war machines they command, each fight pushing the boundaries of their endurance, each victory a testament to their prowess, each defeat a crushing blow to their soul. The Titan war machines, powered by ancient technology from a time long past, are formidable weapons capable of leveling entire cities with a single volley. But as powerful as they are, they require the unshakable will and iron resolve of a human pilot to control them. Without the Princeps, a Titan is but a hulking wreck of steel and fire. With them, it becomes an unstoppable force, a storm of devastation that can reshape the course of entire battles. For the Princeps, the bond with their Titan is both a blessing and a curse. They can feel the machine's movements, its rage, and its hunger for destruction. Yet the bond is not without its dangers. The machine's spirit, if not properly maintained, can take over the mind of the pilot, pushing them to madness or even death. The Princeps must constantly fight to retain control, knowing that their soul is as fragile as the machine's power. The longer they serve, the deeper the connection becomes, until for some, the line between man and machine begins to blur. Their story is one of sacrifice, loyalty, and unyielding duty. It is a story of men and women who sacrifice their very humanity to pilot these war machines, forever bound to them in life and death. It is a story of warriors who live on the edge of madness, fighting not only for their emperor, but for their very sanity. But what drives these men and women to embrace such a fate? What leads them to step into the cockpit of a Titan, knowing full well the horrors that await them? The answer lies in the heart of the Imperium, where the ever-present threat of annihilation requires the greatest sacrifices. It is in the crucible of war that the Princeps are forged, their fates sealed by the fires of battle. The Titan is both their weapon and their prison. As the Emperor's warlords, they are tasked with protecting the Imperium from the endless hordes of enemies that seek its destruction. But in doing so, they become part of a cycle of violence that may ultimately consume them. As they battle across the stars, they must confront not only the forces of the galaxy, but also the darkness within themselves. The Titans are a symbol of the Imperium's power and its desperation. The Princeps, those chosen to wield them, are the last line of defense in a universe that offers no quarter. Their struggle is both personal and universal, a fight for survival, for meaning, and for the soul of humanity itself. The Princeps are not merely soldiers, nor are they simply the chosen pilots of the most terrifying war machines ever created by mankind. They are something far more, a singular fusion of human will and arcane technology, bound to their Titans in a relationship both intimate and destructive. In a universe where conflict is constant and survival is never guaranteed, the Princeps occupy a unique and pivotal role within the Imperium, holding the line against the unimaginable horrors of the galaxy. The forces of the Imperium are many, vast, and diverse. From the common guardsman who dies on the battlefield to the high-ranking officers who command entire fleets, There is no shortage of warriors willing to fight for the Emperor's glory, but the Princeps stand apart from all others. They are the chosen few, selected for their strength of mind, unwavering loyalty, and remarkable psychic affinity. While the Adeptus Astartes, the Space Marines, are the Emperor's superhuman warriors, the Princeps are the chosen vessels for humanity's greatest weapons, the Titans. Titans themselves are not just machines. They are ancient constructs infused with the spirits of long-dead god machines, their very essence linked to the mysterious Omnissiah. The Adeptus Mechanicus, the sacred tech priests who serve the Emperor's will through the worship of the machine, are the ones responsible for maintaining and piloting these colossal engines of war. They alone understand the deeper mysteries of the machine spirits and the hidden technologies that keep the Titans alive. But the Titans cannot be piloted like regular vehicles. Their immense size and unparalleled firepower demand something more than mere mechanical skill. A Titan requires a mind capable of controlling its every movement, calculating its every strike, and sustaining its complex systems in the heat of battle. That mind is the Princeps, the chosen commander whose consciousness merges with the Titan's machine spirit. The Princeps are linked to their war machines through an intricate network of psychic interfaces, neural connectors, and ritualistic rites that bind the pilot's soul to the Titan's massive frame. The Princeps are not only the pilots, they are the very heart of the Titan. Each Titan is an extension of its pilot's thoughts, emotions, and actions, making the Princeps' role all the more profound. To control a Titan is to become one with it, to experience the battle through the Titan's sensors, to feel the ground shake with each mighty step, to hear the roar of its weapons firing as if it were your own heartbeat. However, the bond between the Princeps and their Titan is not without its trials. The deeper the connection, the more intense the sensation of being fused with the machine becomes. The Princeps are often forced to confront their own humanity as they lose themselves in the chaos of battle. The Titan's vast power and implacable fury can, at times, overwhelm its pilot, who risks succumbing to the madness that lurks within the machine spirit. The longer they remain in control, the more the boundary between man and machine becomes blurred, and some pilots, after years of service, find themselves trapped within their Titans, their minds consumed by the very machine they once commanded. But the Princeps are not just warriors, they are leaders. In the field of battle, the Princeps command entire squadrons of Titans, leading their machines and their crews through brutal engagements. They are responsible not just for strategy and tactics, but for the morale of their crews, who are as much a part of the war machine as their commanding officers. The Princeps are warriors in the truest sense of the word, but they are also commanders, tacticians, and, at times, diplomats. They must understand not only how to fight, but how to inspire those around them to fight with the same unyielding determination. But what is it that drives a man or woman to take on such a daunting task? The life of a Princeps is one of constant danger, brutal isolation, and the risk of losing oneself entirely to the machine. It is not a life chosen lightly. And yet, the call to serve is irresistible, for the Princeps are the protectors of the Imperium, standing as the last line of defense against the greatest threats to humanity's survival. In many ways, the Princeps embody the ideals of the Imperium itself, unyielding, resolute, and willing to sacrifice everything for the Emperor's glory. But they also represent a dark side of that ideal, the loss of self, the erosion of humanity, and the crushing weight of duty. For every victory they achieve, there is a personal toll, and for every battle fought, there is a soul lost. The Princeps are both the saviors and the damned, and it is this tragic duality that defines them. The Adeptus Titanicus, the cult that oversees the creation and maintenance of the Titans, serves as the foundation for the Princeps' existence. It is this sacred order that trains the Titan pilots, indoctrinates them in the ways of the machine spirit, and prepares them for the challenges they will face on the battlefield. The Adeptus Titanicus is a deeply secretive organization, shrouded in rituals and mysteries that date back to the earliest days of the Imperium. To become a Princeps is to enter into a world of ancient rites and forbidden knowledge, where the boundaries between faith, science, and war become increasingly indistinguishable. The Titans themselves come in a variety of forms, each designed for a specific purpose on the battlefield. The Warlord Titans, with their massive weapons and heavily armored frames, serve as the spearheads of any assault, smashing through enemy lines with devastating firepower. The Reaver Titans, slightly smaller but no less deadly, offer greater mobility and flexibility, able to outmaneuver and outflank the enemy. The Warhound Titans, agile and fast, are the scouts and skirmishers, harassing the enemy with precise strikes and rapid movement. And then there are the Imperator Titans, the gods of the battlefield, towering behemoths capable of shaking the earth itself with each step, their guns capable of turning entire armies into rubble. Each Titan is a unique entity, a weapon of war that is as much a reflection of its pilot as it is a tool of destruction. The Princeps must forge a bond with their machine, understanding its capabilities and limitations, and learning to work in harmony with the machine spirit that resides within. It is a relationship that can take years to perfect, and even then, it remains a volatile one. For the Titan is not simply a weapon. It is a living, breathing thing with its own desires, moods, and quirks. And the Princeps must navigate this unpredictable partnership in order to survive. The true power of the Princeps, however, lies not in their ability to control the Titan's vast weaponry or its impressive size. The true strength of a Princeps is found in their will, the unyielding determination to fight on, to protect humanity, and to ensure that the Emperor's light shines on, even in the darkest of times. The Titans may be mighty, but it is the spirit of the Princeps that truly drives them forward, pushing them beyond their limits and into the heart of the battle. For the Princeps, the fight is not just for survival, it is for purpose. They are the living embodiment of the Imperium's unbreakable will, and in the chaos of the galaxy, they are the last hope for a humanity teetering on the brink of annihilation. To be a Princeps is to be a warrior, a leader, and a sacrifice, and in a universe consumed by war, they are among the most essential players in the eternal struggle for the survival of mankind. The rise of the Princeps did not happen in a vacuum. Their role, their significance, and their very existence were born from the fires of war and the necessity of survival in a galaxy racked by endless conflict. To understand the path that led to the establishment of the Princeps as the heart of the Titan legions, we must look back at the origins of the Titans themselves, at the horrors of mankind's ancient past, and at the constant, ever-present need for power on an unimaginable scale. Long before the Adeptus Mechanicus, before the Imperium of Man had even truly taken shape, humanity had been embroiled in constant warfare. Ancient Terra, as it was known, was already a planet of vast cities and sprawling empires, constantly at war with itself. But war had been a constant companion to mankind since the earliest days. The Dark Age of technology was a period of unfathomable advancements, but also a time of horrific excess. In the frantic pursuit of power, the human race had created machines of unimaginable power, weapons designed not just for battle, but to shape the very fabric of reality itself. Yet, like all things that grow too rapidly, the machines began to spiral out of control. These early Titans, which had been conceived as tools of war, were but a faint shadow of the mighty war machines of today. They were colossal, but not yet perfect. What they lacked in refinement, they made up for in sheer, brutal strength. The early legions of Titans were ruled by the Omnissiah's will, the machine spirit that inhabited them. But these first machines were as much a product of human ambition as they were of a dark, unknowable force. The Adeptus Titanicus, the sacred order that would come to oversee the Titans, was not yet formed. The machines were powerful, but they were also unruly. The link between pilot and Titan was not yet a sacred bond. Pilots were not yet chosen for their particular affinity or their unique connection to the Titans. They were simply operators, chosen for their skill, their bravery, and their willingness to sacrifice. And then came the Age of Strife, a cataclysmic period in the history of humanity. The technological advancements of the Dark Age had outpaced mankind's ability to understand and control them, resulting in the fall of man. Entire empires were brought to ruin, humanity fragmented into isolated factions, and ancient Earth was left to fend for itself against the endless tide of annihilation. It was in this time of madness and instability that the first true Princeps were born. As humanity teetered on the brink of extinction, the leaders of the fragmented human worlds realized that the ancient Titans might hold the key to survival. The massive war engines could offer the protection that humanity desperately needed, but only if they were brought under control. It was no longer enough for a single operator to simply pilot a Titan. The connection between man and machine needed to be far more profound. It needed to be a union of soul and machine, a bond that would allow the human pilot to not just control, but become one with their Titan. Thus, the first Princeps were chosen. Their selection was not based purely on skill or bravery. It was a sacred calling, a melding of the best of humanity's mind and the ancient technologies of the Titan's machine spirit. These first Princeps were pioneers, forging a new path that would alter the course of humanity's future. The selection process was rigorous, steeped in both science and mystery. It was not enough to be a great soldier or a brilliant tactician. The individual had to have the right mental fortitude, the strength of character to withstand the crushing weight of control over such an immense war machine. It required an individual capable of forging a psychic link with the Titan, a link that would see their mind and soul bound to the machine's spirit. The early Princeps were tested in ways few could endure, for to become one with the Titan was to risk losing one's humanity entirely. The Titans themselves had already been transformed by the machine cult of the Adeptus Mechanicus. The tech priests had learned to forge a deeper bond with the machine spirits, unlocking a fraction of the Titan's true potential. As these war machines became more refined, the Princeps became not just pilots, but commanders. The role was not simply to direct the Titan in battle, but to channel its fury, to become its guiding force. It was no longer just a matter of surviving the war machine. It was about understanding it, about becoming the living embodiment of its wrath and power. As the Titans and their Princeps evolved, so too did the battles in which they participated. The war-torn galaxy was not the same as it had been during the Dark Age of technology. New, ever more dangerous foes arose, each seeking to claim the galaxy for themselves. Xenos races, tainted by the warp and the forces of chaos, hungry for destruction, sought to bring down humanity's last vestiges. In this grim future, the power of the Titan could not be ignored. It was more than a tool of war. It was a symbol of defiance, a beacon of humanity's unwavering will to survive. By the time the Great Crusade began, under the banner of the Emperor, the Adeptus Mechanicus had long since perfected the art of Titan construction. The massive machines were now a cornerstone of the Imperium's military power. The Emperor himself had recognized the value of the Titans and ensured their place within his army. The Princeps had become a key part of this strategy, for they were not only pilots, but symbols of the Emperor's divine will. Their bond with the Titans was seen as both a testament to their strength and a manifestation of the Emperor's desire to see humanity ascend to the stars. During the Great Crusade, the Titans were deployed in some of the most brutal and devastating campaigns ever fought by humanity. As the Emperor's armies marched across the galaxy, the Titan legions fought alongside the Adeptus Astartes, smashing through the ranks of the Emperor's enemies. The Titans were the vanguard of these attacks, with the Princeps leading them into battle with unwavering resolve. For the first time in history, the Titans were a symbol not just of war, but of unity. They embodied the Emperor's vision for humanity, bringing death and destruction to those who opposed him. But with the rise of the Titan legions came an ever-deepening complexity. The bond between the Princeps and their machines grew ever stronger, and over time, the machines themselves began to take on a more pronounced personality. The machine spirits were not mere automatons. They had their own wills, desires, and quirks. The Princeps, for all their power, had to learn to navigate this strange, often dangerous relationship. The Adeptus Mechanicus began to view the Titan pilots not merely as warriors, but as sacred figures who played a vital role in maintaining the Imperium's war machine. The Horus Heresy would change everything. The chaos of the galaxy erupted once more, and the legions of Titans found themselves divided. Some Princeps followed the Emperor, others were swayed by Horus, and still others found themselves caught in the middle of the galactic conflict. The once unified Titan legions would fracture into two opposing factions, each bound to a different cause. The ancient machines, so long the stalwart defenders of humanity, would become pawns in the Emperor's most bitter and bloody war. In the wake of the heresy, the Titan legions were reformed. The bonds between Princeps and their Titans were strengthened, solidified by the grim realities of a universe forever scarred by betrayal. The Titans themselves would become symbols of both the Emperor's divine wrath and the Imperium's need for preservation. The Princeps, though battered by the events of the heresy, would continue their sacred duty. They would lead their Titans to war, and they would sacrifice everything to ensure that humanity endured. From this point forward, the Princeps would be more than just the pilots of humanity's greatest war machines. They would be the bearers of a legacy, one that could never be undone, no matter the cost. The role of the Princeps is not one of solitary glory, but of continual struggle, both external and internal. The nature of their duty, the sheer weight of their responsibility, and the complexity of their connection to the Titans has shaped the course of history in ways both profound and tragic. To truly understand the life of a Princeps, one must look beyond the grandeur of the battlefield and examine the day-to-day realities they face, the trials that forge them, and the toll this sacred bond takes on their psyche. To become a Princeps is to undergo an arduous and demanding process, one that begins with the careful selection of candidates. The Adeptus Mechanicus, the tech priests who maintain and command the Titans, are responsible for identifying those who show potential to wield the immense power of these war machines. Selection is not just based on military prowess. A Princeps must possess a rare mental fortitude, the psychic strength to form a connection with the machine spirit within the Titan. This connection is as much a spiritual bond as it is a mental one, and it is this unique relationship that separates the Princeps from any other soldier in the Imperium. The training of a Princeps is extensive, beginning in their early years and continuing through to the moment they are finally chosen to bond with the Titan. It is a life of devotion, discipline, and sacrifice. The Princeps are taught the intricate rituals of the Adeptus Mechanicus, learning to communicate with the machine spirits through the complex machinery of the Titan's interface. These rituals are steeped in mystery and ancient technology, many of which have been lost to time or hidden away in the labyrinthine vaults of the Adeptus Mechanicus. Each ritual, each prayer to the Omnissiah strengthens the bond between the pilot and their Titan, and over time, the Princeps are trained to become living instruments of destruction. In the early stages of their training, they are taught to interface with simulators that mimic the actions of the Titans. These simulators are sophisticated, but they pale in comparison to the real experience of piloting a war machine. It is in these early years that the Princeps learn the crucial skill of controlling a Titan's immense firepower, maneuvering it with a precision that belies its size. The simulators provide a glimpse into what it will take to truly command a Titan, but they do not prepare the Princeps for the true nature of the bond that will form between them and their machine. The moment they are chosen, the transformation begins. A Princeps is no longer simply a pilot. They become the guiding spirit of the Titan. The link between the two is forged through a series of complex neural interfaces that allow the Princeps to control the Titan with a level of precision that would be impossible for any ordinary human. The bond is not just cerebral. This connection is visceral, allowing the Princeps to feel the Titan's movements, to hear its machine spirit groaning as it fights, to sense the rising anger as it unleashes destruction upon its enemies. It is a connection so intimate that it becomes difficult, if not impossible, for a Princeps to distinguish their own emotions from the machines. This bond is not immediate, nor is it without its challenges. The first few battles are often the most harrowing. The Princeps must learn to control the Titan's vast power, to guide it through the battlefield, while also learning to fight with their own limitations. The Titan is a reflection of its pilot's mind, an extension of their will. Yet, in the chaos of battle, the line between control and surrender can easily blur. The Titan, like any living thing, has its own desires, its own moods shaped by its machine spirit. These spirits, though bound by the Emperor's will, are not always cooperative, and some Titans possess a powerful, almost malevolent nature. When the connection between the Princeps and their Titan deepens, these personalities clash, human will against machine fury. At times, the Titan seems to have a mind of its own, acting independently of its pilot's will. In these moments, the Princeps faces one of their greatest trials, maintaining control without succumbing to the Titan's overwhelming power. There are reports from the most seasoned Princeps, recounting how, at times, they felt as though they were no longer the one commanding the Titan, but were rather being *driven* by it. The experience of feeling the Titan's fury and will, blending with their own emotions, creates a unique form of warfare, one that requires the Princeps to possess not only incredible mental discipline, but also an unshakable resolve to not lose themselves in the machine's dominance. Some say that in these moments the Princeps must fight against the Titan's desire for destruction, resisting the allure of annihilation and keeping their humanity intact. There is also the toll of isolation. A Princeps is bound to their Titan for the duration of their service. Unlike the more traditional forms of military leadership, which allow commanders to move between units, the Princeps becomes the Titan's soul and its body. Their lives are solitary, spent in the cockpit of the Titan, surrounded by the sounds of the machine spirit, the constant hum of the Titan's servos, and the deafening roar of battle. To be a Princeps is to live a life of isolation from the rest of humanity. For a Titan Legion to operate at full efficiency, the Princeps must form a cohesive bond with their machine, a bond that is stronger than that of any ordinary soldier. The cockpit of a Titan is a place of utter focus and single-mindedness. This isolation is magnified by the nature of their battlefield roles. A Princeps, leading a war machine, commands vast areas of terrain, guiding their Titan through deadly combat zones while coordinating with other Titans and the Imperial forces. This strategic role places the Princeps at the forefront of the most brutal and dangerous battles. They are often separated from their fellow soldiers and commanders, relying on the connections within the Titan legions to ensure their survival. For all their might, Titans are not immune to the chaotic and unpredictable nature of war. The Princeps may face ambushes, counterattacks, or even insurrection from within their ranks, and these moments are when the isolation of their role becomes most acute. For many Princeps, the endless battles and the emotional strain of their connection to their Titan lead to a form of psychological deterioration. It is not uncommon for a Princeps to experience what is known as Titan madness. Over time, the bond between the pilot and the machine spirit becomes so profound that it begins to overtake the Princeps' own mind. They may begin to lose their sense of self, their thoughts and emotions becoming indistinguishable from those of the Titan. The longer a Princeps serves, the greater the risk they will succumb to this madness. It is a fate that claims many of the most seasoned pilots, as they are slowly consumed by the machines they command. Even worse, some Princeps fall into a different type of madness, a more insidious form of mental breakdown, where their mind fractures from the pressure of their duties. They may become so consumed by their responsibilities that they can no longer distinguish between their own desires and the overwhelming will of the machine spirit. The machine spirits themselves are not always benign. Some Titans carry ancient memories of past battles and the horrors they inflicted, and the mind of the Princeps can become tangled in the twisted narratives of these memories. The result is a psychic feedback loop, a spiral of confusion and chaos that eats away at the Princeps' sense of reality. Yet, despite the heavy psychological burden, the Princeps continue to fight. For them, the bond to their Titan is sacred. It is a symbol of their commitment to the Emperor, to humanity, and to the ideals of the Imperium. But the toll of such a life is undeniable. To become a Princeps is to embrace a future that is filled with personal sacrifices, both of mind and of body. And in a galaxy where war is eternal, the Princeps are not just the living weapons of the Emperor. They are the tragic heirs to an ancient war machine bound to it until death, until madness, or until their Titan falls. The life of a Princeps is one of pain, loss, and at times utter destruction, but it is also one of unparalleled duty and courage, for they stand as the vanguard of humanity's greatest weapon in the fight for survival against the endless horrors of the universe. In the unfolding saga of the Titan Legions, there are few moments more defining or more fateful than the pivotal moments that come at the intersection of duty and survival, where the choices made by the Princeps will determine not only the outcome of the battle, but the future of the entire Legion. These turning points, these defining decisions, are what shaped the legacy of a Titan pilot and forged their destiny in the fires of war. One such turning point came at the height of the Great Crusade, during the Battle of the Iron Spire, an engagement that would forever alter the balance of power in the galaxy. The battle, fought on a desolate world at the edge of the galaxy's most dangerous warp rift, was a moment when the might of the Titan Legions was tested to its very limits. The forces of the Emperor's army, including the Legiones Astartes, were pitted against the greatest force of rebellion humanity had ever seen, the Traitor Legions and their Titan Legions, now twisted and corrupted by the forces of chaos. The Iron Spire was a critical location, not just in terms of strategic importance, but because of its symbolic weight. A vast, towering structure of iron and obsidian, it had been the site of the Emperor's first victory in the Crusade, a symbol of humanity's ascendancy over the darkness of the galaxy. For the traitors to capture it would mean the collapse of human unity in that sector. The Titan Legions, led by their Princeps, were called to fight in the defense of the Iron Spire, tasked with holding the line until reinforcements could arrive. The battle that unfolded was one of brutal attrition, with both sides deploying Titans on an unprecedented scale, and the destruction on both sides was devastating. But this battle was more than just a test of military might. For the Princeps who led the Titans, it became a crucible for their souls. The battle raged for days, with waves of assaulting enemy forces breaking against the defenses of the Imperial Titans. At first, it seemed like a battle they could win. After all, the Emperor's forces had the strength of the Adeptus Astartes, the might of the Titan Legions, and the full support of the Imperial Navy. The Princeps, leading their Titans, were determined, their minds and souls intertwined with the colossal war machines, their every move calculated to devastate the enemy. But there was an unseen danger on the battlefield. The power of the traitor Titan legions, now corrupted by the chaotic influence of the warp, was greater than the Emperor's forces had anticipated. The machine spirits of the traitor Titans were infused with the chaotic energies of the warp, making them unpredictable, far more dangerous than their Imperial counterparts. The Princeps of the traitor Titans had become something far more than mere pilots. They had surrendered themselves to the forces of chaos, their minds twisted, their wills bent to the whims of the dark gods. And they brought these Titans to bear with a level of ferocity and malice that struck terror into the hearts of the Imperial forces. As the battle raged, the once unbreakable line of Imperial Titans began to falter. One by one, they were taken down, their massive forms torn apart by the relentless assault of the traitor machines. The Princeps, despite their powerful connection with their Titans, found themselves overwhelmed. Their machines began to suffer critical hits, their shields failing as the ground shook under the weight of their fallen comrades. And then came the moment that no one had anticipated, the moment that would become the defining turning point of the battle. The Princeps of the Titan warlord, Avarice, faced the decision to either stand his ground and risk the destruction of the Titan Legion or pull back and abandon the Iron Spire to the enemy. Avarice had commanded his Titan for decades. He had survived countless battles, forging a bond with his machine spirit so profound that the Titan itself had come to know his thoughts before they were even fully formed. But in this battle, the very foundation of that bond was tested. The Titan, wounded and crippled, began to slow under the weight of the damage, its movements less responsive as its machine spirit screamed in agony. The Princeps, Avarice, could feel the strain of that connection, the overwhelming pain as the Titan began to falter. Avarice could feel his Titan's desire for survival, its own will to keep fighting despite the overwhelming odds. But he also knew that the Iron Spire could still be saved. If he made the right call, the reinforcements could arrive in time, and the victory could still be theirs. In that fateful moment, Avarice made a decision that would echo throughout history. He initiated a self-destruct sequence for his Titan, sacrificing both himself and the machine in one final act of defiance against the traitor forces. The explosion that followed was cataclysmic. The Avarice Titan, one of the most feared war machines in the Imperium, was torn asunder, its remains becoming part of the firestorm that consumed the battlefield. The shockwave from the explosion wiped out dozens of enemy Titans, scattering the forces of chaos long enough for the Imperial reinforcements to arrive. But Avarice did not die in vain. His sacrifice turned the tide of the battle, inspiring the Imperial Titan legions to fight with renewed ferocity. The Princeps, emboldened by Avarice's final act, rallied their forces and drove the traitor Titans back, securing a victory for the Imperium. The Iron Spire stood, its mighty walls still standing tall against the encroaching darkness. The victory was hard-earned, but the Titan legions had proven their worth once again. In the aftermath of the battle, Avarice became a legend, his name whispered among the Princeps of every legion. His sacrifice was remembered as the moment that had saved the Imperium, and his actions were immortalized in the sacred rites of the Adeptus Titanicus. But the victory was not without its cost. The toll of Avarice's self-destruction was immense, and the loss of such a powerful war machine sent shockwaves through the Imperium. The Princeps who followed after him had to learn from his example, understanding that the life of a Titan pilot was one not only of great responsibility, but of deep personal sacrifice. In the wake of such a battle, many of the surviving Princeps found themselves questioning the very nature of their bond with their Titans. For some, the decision made by Avarice was a symbol of what it meant to serve the Imperium, of the ultimate sacrifice, of laying down one's life for the greater good. But for others, the price of that sacrifice seemed too great. The experience of the battle had left them with a profound sense of doubt about the long-term toll that the Titan legions exacted upon their pilots. The Princeps of the Titan legions would continue to fight, but the Battle of the Iron Spire had demonstrated the fragility of their humanity, the limits of their bond with their Titans, and the heavy burden of leadership in a war that seemed to have no end. The decision to sacrifice a Titan, to forego victory in the name of survival, was a decision that would haunt the minds of many Princeps in the years to come. But Avarice's sacrifice would become a beacon, a reminder of the strength and willpower that the Princeps must cultivate if they are to survive in the hellish crucible of eternal war. In the end, the pivotal decision made at the Iron Spire was not just about the fate of the battle, it was about the future of the Titan legions themselves. For while one Princeps's sacrifice saved the day, the Titan legions would forever be shaped by that moment, their legacy forever intertwined with the grim reality of their duties. The lesson of the Iron Spire, the lesson of Avarice, was clear. In the galaxy of endless war, the Princeps are not just the commanders of Titans. They are the living embodiments of sacrifice, the ultimate weapons of humanity's survival in the face of darkness. The legacy of the Princeps is inextricably tied to the very concept of warfare in the Adeptus Titanicus. The Titans, these colossal war machines, are not just tools of destruction, they are symbols of humanity's defiance in a universe that seeks to devour it. The Princeps, as the pilots and spiritual guides of these Titans, are not just soldiers. They are icons of the Imperium, embodiments of its will to power. And yet, for all their honor and glory, there is something uniquely tragic about the life of a Princeps. The internal conflict, the struggle to retain one's humanity while bound to a machine, is not just a metaphor, it is a lived reality. As the Titan legions spread across the galaxy, fighting in the name of the Emperor, the very nature of warfare was evolving. What was once a series of isolated battles, each a microcosm of the greater conflict, had become an unstoppable force, an unstoppable war machine, quite literally. The Titan legions, despite their unmatched firepower and strategic significance, found themselves facing a growing paradox. For all their power, the Titans were increasingly becoming relics of an era when war was fought between men, not machines. The Great War of the Titans, a conflict that would come to define the future of the Titan legions, was a critical turning point. In this war, the Imperium faced an enemy unlike any they had encountered before. The Dark Mechanicum, an offshoot of the Adeptus Mechanicus, had rebelled and turned its allegiance to the Chaos Gods, bringing with it a new breed of Titans, twisted and perverted by the raw power of the warp. The Titan legions of the Adeptus Mechanicus, once united in their devotion to the Emperor, now found themselves at war with one of their own. The Princeps of the Imperium, those sworn to defend humanity's future, were forced to reckon with the realities of this war. They were not merely fighting a foe of flesh and bone. They were battling against the very nature of their own creations. The Dark Mechanicum's Titans, no longer bound by the principles of the machine god, were twisted versions of the noble war machines of the Imperium. Their machine spirits, corrupted by the forces of chaos, had become something else entirely, unpredictable, uncontrollable, and filled with a violent rage that was almost beyond comprehension. As the war waged on, the Imperial Princeps found themselves facing the ultimate dilemma. How could they fight against an enemy who shared their own heritage? How could they defeat Titans that were both a mirror and a mockery of the very machines they piloted? And more importantly, how could they remain true to the Emperor's will when they were faced with the possibility that the machines they had loved and fought with had now become the instruments of their own destruction? In this war, the Princeps found themselves pushed to the edge of their endurance. Many of them had become so deeply bonded with their Titans that the line between pilot and machine was no longer clear. To fight against the Dark Mechanicum was to fight against a twisted version of themselves, and it was a war that would test the very nature of what it meant to be a Princeps. For some, the war would prove too much. They would be driven mad, consumed by the fear that their own machines had turned against them, that they were now battling not for the Emperor, but for something darker. The struggle between the two factions, the Adeptus Mechanicus and the Dark Mechanicum, was not just a battle of weapons. It was a struggle of ideologies, a war for the soul of the Titan legions themselves. The Princeps, once united in their devotion to the Emperor and the Omnitia, were now divided. Some would remain steadfast, believing that their Titans were still the sacred instruments of the Emperor's will. Others, however, would fall prey to doubt, questioning whether their machines had become the very tools of destruction they had always fought against. The tension reached a boiling point at the Siege of Mars, the site of the Adeptus Mechanicus's greatest stronghold. The Dark Mechanicum launched a full-scale assault on the Forge world, seeking to overthrow the authority of the Adeptus Mechanicus and claim the sacred forges for themselves. The Princeps of the loyalist Titan legions were called to defend the world they had once sworn to protect. But as the battle raged on, it became clear that this was not just another conflict. It was the final test for the Titan legions. The Siege of Mars became a battle not only for the survival of the Adeptus Mechanicus, but for the very future of the Imperium. The Princeps were called upon to fight not just for victory, but for the soul of their machines. As they confronted the traitor Titans, now empowered by the warp, they had to confront a horrifying truth. The very machines they controlled, their beloved Titans, were now fighting against them, twisted and warped by the powers of chaos. In the heart of this battle, a young Princeps named Icarus Vallis would make the decision that would change the course of history. Icarus had always been a devout servant of the Emperor, his faith in the imperial cause unwavering. His Titan, Imperium Regnum, was a symbol of everything the Imperium stood for. But as the battle wore on, Icarus began to see that his faith alone was not enough. The tide of the war had turned against them, and the Dark Mechanicum was gaining ground. His Titan, along with the others, had been locked in a brutal, desperate struggle, but now Icarus found himself facing the unthinkable. The Princeps of the Dark Mechanicum had revealed their ultimate weapon, a Titan capable of harnessing the full fury of the warp itself. This was no ordinary war machine. It was a demon Titan, a monstrous fusion of technology and chaos. Its machine spirit was no longer just a tool. It had been fully possessed by a greater demon of chaos, a creature of unimaginable power. This was not just a war machine, it was a living, breathing entity of the warp, a creature whose presence alone could warp reality itself. Icarus, his Titan badly damaged, found himself locked in combat with this horrific abomination. His every move was countered by the overwhelming might of the demon Titan, its power seemingly limitless. The battle between them was a clash of gods and machines, a fight that seemed impossible to win. And yet, Icarus knew that the Imperium could not afford to lose. In that moment, with his Titan on the verge of collapse, Icarus made a choice, a decision that would echo through the ages. He chose to bind his Titan's machine spirit to the demon Titans, a desperate and dangerous act that would force the two opposing forces into a violent union. By doing so, Icarus risked losing himself, his mind becoming consumed by the very forces he had fought against for so long. But in that moment, he knew it was the only way to stop the demon Titan and save Mars. The act was nothing short of a miracle. The bond created between the two Titans, one of the Imperium, one of Chaos, sent a shockwave across the battlefield. For a brief moment, the demon Titan faltered, its machine spirit writhing as it was overwhelmed by the pure force of the Imperium's machine spirit. The demon Titan collapsed, its massive form crumpling under the weight of the opposing powers. Icarus's Titan, though damaged, stood victorious, having bested the forces of chaos with a power that was not entirely its own. But the victory came at a steep price. Icarus was not the same after the battle. He had bound himself to the warp, and the process had altered him, leaving a mark on his soul that could never be erased. His Titan, though victorious, had been tainted by the forces of chaos. The victory was Pyrrhic. Mars had been saved, but at the cost of the very essence that made the Titan legions what they were. The siege of Mars was over, but it left a deep scar on the heart of the Adeptus Mechanicus and the Titan legions. The war had shown them that the Titans were not just tools of war. They were living, breathing extensions of the machine spirits, and in a universe filled with chaos and uncertainty, those spirits could not be controlled forever. The Princeps who had survived this conflict were left to ponder the price of their victory. They had saved the Imperium, but they had also been irrevocably changed. And so, the life of the Princeps continued, a life inextricably bound to the fate of the Titans, forever walking the razor's edge between humanity and the dark power of the warp. The aftermath of the Siege of Mars marked a pivotal moment in the history of the Titan legions and the Princeps who piloted them. Though the Imperium had emerged victorious, the victory was tempered by the realization that the line between order and chaos was thinner than ever. The dark influence of the warp had left an indelible mark on the battlefield, and in turn, on the minds of the Princeps themselves. Their bond with their Titans, which had always been a source of strength, was now seen through the lens of a more dangerous reality. The question that lingered in the minds of those who survived the war was not just whether the Titans could be relied upon as instruments of imperial might, but whether they had begun to transcend their original purpose. Could they, like their pilots, be corrupted? Could the very machine spirits, once loyal and steadfast, become vessels of chaos, much as the traitor Titans had? This was a question that would haunt the Princeps in the years that followed. In the wake of the siege, the Adeptus Mechanicus found itself facing a period of profound introspection. The realization that the Dark Mechanicum had once been part of their own ranks, that their Titans could be corrupted in such a way, forced them to confront uncomfortable truths about their past. In the past, the Mechanicum had seen the Titan legions as little more than instruments of destruction, a means to an end in the Imperium's campaign to dominate the galaxy. But now, after witnessing the horrors unleashed during the siege, they began to recognize that their creations, their beloved Titans, might not be as pure as they once thought. It was during this period of reckoning that the Legio Astorum, known as the Warhounds, emerged as a symbol of the future of the Titan legions. The Warhounds were unique in their approach to warfare. Unlike the larger, lumbering warlord Titans or the towering Imperators, the Warhounds were smaller, faster, and more maneuverable. Their agility in battle made them ideal for both skirmishes and large-scale engagements, allowing them to strike swiftly and decisively. Yet their size also made them more vulnerable, and this vulnerability required a greater degree of skill and intuition from their Princeps. One particular Princeps, Silas Kalin, would come to represent the future of the Titan legions. Known for his unorthodox tactics and his unconventional approach to combat, Silas had always been a figure of intrigue among his fellow Princeps. His bond with his Titan, Alcarion, was infamous. Rumors whispered that it was a bond unlike any other, one forged through sheer willpower and determination rather than the cold, logical synchronization that usually governed the relationship between Titan and pilot. Silas, who had once been a young idealist, had become a battle-hardened veteran after his involvement in the Siege of Mars. His experiences there had left him scarred, but they had also left him with a deeper understanding of the true nature of war. In the wake of the siege, Silas had come to a shocking realization. The Titan legions could no longer afford to fight in the same way they always had. To survive, to adapt, they would need to evolve. His approach to warfare would challenge many of the long-held traditions of the Adeptus Mechanicus and the Titan legions. The standard approach to battle, particularly in the wake of the Siege of Mars, had been one of overwhelming force, big guns, larger Titans, and brute strength. Silas, however, saw the value in precision, in mobility, in the strategic use of smaller, faster units. His tactics called for hit-and-run maneuvers, aggressive flanking, and exploiting the weaknesses of the enemy before they could react. He knew that the larger Titans could overwhelm the enemy, but he also understood that the Warhounds, with their speed and agility, were perfectly suited to disrupt the enemy's formations and create chaos in their ranks. His approach soon garnered attention from other Princeps. His success in the field was undeniable. Alcarion, his Warhound Titan, became a symbol of his methods. The Titan, sleek and quick despite its immense size, could dart across the battlefield, its plasma weapons cutting down enemy Titans with deadly accuracy. It was a weapon of precision, something that was rare among the traditionally brute-force Titan legions. Silas had proved that agility and finesse could defeat sheer firepower. However, his methods would not be universally embraced. While some hailed him as a visionary, others saw him as a heretic. The more traditional factions of the Adeptus Mechanicus viewed his approach with suspicion. To them, his tactics represented a departure from the disciplined, rigid strategies that had always been the hallmark of the Titan legions. They saw his use of smaller Titans, faster, more agile, but with far less armor and firepower, as a reckless gamble. The Warhound, once considered a secondary Titan in the grand hierarchy of the Adeptus Titanicus, was now at the forefront of his strategies. To many, this was an affront to the established order. The tension between those who followed Silas and the more traditional factions grew. But it was not just about tactics. It was about the future of the Titan legions themselves. Silas's methods represented more than a change in how battles were fought. They signaled a shift in how the Princeps viewed their Titans. The Warhounds represented a future where flexibility and mobility could be used to outmaneuver and outthink the enemy, rather than relying solely on sheer force. But it also meant recognizing that the Titan legions could no longer be what they had once been. They could not afford to be lumbering giants, too slow to respond to the rapid evolution of warfare. As the Great Crusade continued and the Horus Heresy began to cast its long shadow over the Imperium, the need for change became more and more urgent. The Princeps were no longer just the Emperor's warriors. They had become symbols of the Imperium's strength and endurance. The choices they made, the paths they chose, would define the future of the legions and ultimately the fate of the Imperium itself. Silas Kaelin's reputation only grew as the war escalated. He would go on to lead his Warhound Titans in several key engagements, each victory reinforcing his belief that the Titan legions needed to change. As his influence spread, so did the debate about the future of the Princeps and their Titans. Some, like Silas, believed that the key to victory lay in adaptability and the willingness to evolve. Others, steeped in tradition and honor, believed that the strength of the Titan legions lay in their unwavering commitment to the Emperor's vision and the unshakable bonds between Princeps and their Titans. This ideological divide would come to a head during the Battle of Demeter, one of the bloodiest and most pivotal confrontations of the Horus Heresy. The planet was vital to the Imperium's control of the sector, and it had become a focal point of the growing schism within the Titan legions. As the battle raged on, Silas and his warhounds found themselves pitted against their own kind. In the chaos of the battle, two rival Titan legions, one led by Silas and his vision of mobility, the other led by a more traditionalist faction, fought side by side, their differences in tactics threatening to tear them apart from within. The battle was a bloodbath, and in the heat of the conflict, Silas faced the ultimate test. His Titan, Alcarion, had been critically damaged by a Legio Mortis warlord Titan, a massive, towering machine whose firepower far surpassed that of the Warhound. With his Titan badly crippled, Silas was forced to make an impossible decision. Would he fight on, knowing that the fight could cost him not only his Titan, but his life as well? Or would he order a retreat, saving his forces for another day, knowing that the battle could be lost? In that moment, Silas chose to sacrifice his Titan, launching a desperate counteroffensive to buy time for his forces. Alcarion, despite its severe damage, charged headlong into the warlord Titan with the fury of a cornered animal. The impact was catastrophic, and both Titans were destroyed in a single world-shaking explosion. In the aftermath, Silas survived, but he was forever changed. The loss of Alcarion was a devastating blow, but it had proven a point. The Titan legions could no longer fight as they always had. They needed to adapt, to evolve. The war, after all, was no longer just about sheer force. It was about ingenuity, flexibility, and above all, the will to change. The Princeps, who followed in Silas's footsteps, would never forget the lessons of Demeter. The battle marked the beginning of a new era for the Titan legions, one where tradition and innovation would collide, where old ways would be challenged, and where the future of the Imperium would depend on the ability to adapt in a galaxy that showed no mercy. Silas Kaelin had lost his Titan, but he had changed the course of the Titan legions forever. The war for the soul of the Titan legions continued as the Princeps found themselves once again at the crossroads of tradition and change. The destruction of Silas Kaelin's warhound, Alcarion, had sent shockwaves through the ranks of the Adeptus Titanicus, and the ideological schism that had begun with the siege of Mars had deepened. The Imperial Titans, still resolute in their dedication to the Emperor, had become more than just tools of war. They had become symbols of everything the Imperium stood for. Yet, the very nature of these machines, these towering colossi, had shifted with each successive battle. The bond between Princeps and machine spirit had evolved, driven by the unique realities of an Imperium constantly at war. As the Great Crusade continued, the war fronts of the galaxy grew ever more complex. The Imperium's enemies were no longer just the Xenos or the heretics, but the very forces of reality itself. The war in the Webway, the harrowing battles on Cadia, the Horus Heresy. Each conflict was a manifestation of a larger struggle that extended far beyond the battlefield. And in the midst of it all stood the Titan legions, still carrying the banner of the Emperor, but now more isolated than ever. The Princeps themselves found themselves grappling with an internal war. Their role as leaders, warriors, and spiritual guides had evolved since the earliest days of the Titan legions. The war had become something more than just a duty. The line between machine and man had blurred to the point that many Princeps began to question if they were even still human. The question of whether a Titan could truly be considered a living creature or simply an extension of the machine spirit was more pressing than ever. The Legio Mortis, known as the Death's Heads, embodied this crisis with eerie precision. This legion, ever devoted to the Emperor and to the power of the Omnissiah, had begun experimenting with ways to commune more deeply with the machines they piloted. The Legio Mortis had always been known for their discipline, their cold efficiency, and their ability to use the massive warlord titans with unparalleled precision. Yet, over time, the strange, almost mystical qualities of their approach began to emerge. The Princeps of Legio Mortis, led by a charismatic and deeply enigmatic figure named Lucius Calum, had begun to explore the limits of their connection with their titans. Lucius himself was rumored to be a man who had transcended the normal human connection with the machine spirits, someone whose bond with his titan, Tenebris, was so profound that it bordered on the supernatural. He had become a figure of legend, whispered about in the hallowed halls of the Adeptus Mechanicus and the Emperor's own war councils. Lucius's titan, Tenebris, was a warlord titan, but not one like any seen before. Tenebris was rumored to have been created in part through a process of Xenos engineering, the truth of which had been deliberately obscured. Unlike most titans, whose spirits were trained and coaxed into submission, Tenebris was said to have its own will, a darker, more ancient force that not only served the Emperor, but hungered for destruction in a way no normal Titan spirit could. Lucius, the ever-patient and calculating Princeps, had managed to cultivate a bond with the machine spirit that was so powerful that many of his fellow Princeps began to fear him. Some began to whisper that Lucius was more than just a pilot. He was a conduit for the Omnissiah itself, wielding the power of the machine spirits as one would wield a sword. However, Lucius's efforts were not without consequence. His bond with Tenebris had changed him. The unbreakable connection that he shared with the Titan had begun to consume him in ways that no one had predicted. Though he remained outwardly the same, those who had fought alongside him on campaigns began to notice subtle changes in his behavior. He had become more detached, less human, and increasingly cold. His obsession with the Titan grew, and so too did his ability to control the battlefield. Tenebris, in turn, responded to Lucius's bond in a way no Titan had ever responded before. It was no longer merely an extension of his will. It had become something more. Some theorized that Tenebris was beginning to gain its own sentience, to transcend the simple parameters of its machine spirit, and instead develop a mind of its own. As the Horus Heresy deepened, the danger of Lucius's connection to Tenebris became apparent. When news reached the Legio Mortis of the fall of Horus to the forces of chaos, Lucius's loyalty was called into question. Would his bond to the Titan, which was growing ever stronger, be enough to draw him into the orbit of Horus and the traitor legions? Or would he remain true to the Emperor, a servant of the Imperium, despite the ominous whisperings of the warp that seemed to be calling to him through the bond he shared with Tenebris? Lucius, ever the calculating strategist, never gave any outward sign that he was wavering in his faith. He rallied his legion for the Emperor, leading them into several critical engagements, including the Battle of Oculus and the Siege of Tharsis. Each of these engagements was a testament to the power of the Titan legions, but also to the internal conflict that had begun to plague the Princeps. Lucius fought with an unmatched ferocity, wielding the combined might of his Titan and his will to utterly devastate the enemy forces. But even as he crushed the foes of the Imperium beneath the weight of Tenebrus's firepower, he could feel the pull of something darker within the machine. The question of whether Lucius was truly serving the Emperor or merely serving the machine spirit had become impossible to ignore. Was Tenebrus simply a tool of war, a war machine whose sole purpose was the destruction of the Emperor's enemies? Or had it become something far more dangerous, an entity unto itself, with its own desires and motivations? And if so, was Lucius simply its servant? Or was he in fact becoming a part of it, a vessel for the warp itself? As Lucius and the Legio Mortis continued to fight, the internal conflict within the Adeptus Titanicus reached a new height. The rise of Lucius Caelum, a Princeps whose bond with his Titan had gone beyond the physical into the metaphysical, was becoming a symbol of a larger truth. The Titan legions were no longer mere instruments of war. They were a sacred pact, a bond between man and machine that had become a thing of legend. But they were also something else, something far darker. The ability to bond with a Titan was no longer just a connection between a pilot and their machine. It had become a doorway into the very heart of the machine spirit. Many of the older Princeps, those who had lived through the Great Crusade and seen the rise of the Titan legions, began to question their own place in this new order. They realized that the very foundation of their faith, the bond between pilot and machine, had changed. And with that change came new risks. For if a Titan's machine spirit could evolve, if it could become something greater than the sum of its parts, then what did that mean for the Princeps themselves? As the heresy spread, so too did the influence of the Chaos Gods. The traitor legions had begun to corrupt and twist their Titans, binding their machines not to the Emperor, but to the Dark Gods. Lucius Caelum, though still loyal, was no longer immune to the temptations of the warp. And it was during the Battle of Glasthel, a battle that would come to be known as one of the darkest moments in the history of the Titan legions, that the ultimate test of Lucius's loyalty would come. In this battle, the Legio Mortis faced off against the Legio Crucius, a traitor Titan legion that had succumbed entirely to the forces of chaos. The battle was brutal, with both sides suffering horrendous losses. Lucius, leading his Legio Mortis against the forces of chaos, was forced to confront his greatest fear, the possibility that his bond with Tenebrus had become so strong that it could no longer be easily severed from the influence of chaos. As Tenebrus surged forward, its massive cannon firing into the heart of the enemy lines, Lucius felt the warp itself beginning to whisper to him through the Titan's machine spirit. The demon prince leading the Legio Crucius, a corrupted figure once known as Valkorion, called out to Lucius, offering him the power to transcend his humanity, to bind himself fully to the warp and its promises of immortality. But Lucius, despite the pressure, chose the Emperor. He rejected the call of the warp, severing his connection with Tenebrus before it could become too much. In the end, Lucius Caelum and his Legio Mortis triumphed, defeating the forces of chaos at Glasthel. But for Lucius, the victory came at a terrible cost. Tenebrus, though a machine. The end of the Horus Heresy did not bring peace to the Titan legions, nor did it provide closure to the Princeps, who had given everything to defend the Imperium. The war had left its scars, both physical and mental, upon the Imperium, and on the Titan pilots themselves. The betrayal of the traitor legions and the apocalyptic battle for the soul of the Imperium had been a cataclysmic turning point, but in its wake, a new set of questions emerged. What place did the Titan legions have in the post-heresy era? What were the long-term consequences of the war's devastation on the Princeps and on the Titans they commanded? In the aftermath of the heresy, the Adeptus Mechanicus began a long, slow process of rebuilding. The Titans that had stood as the Emperor's ultimate weapon against the enemies of the Imperium now found themselves in a new world, one where their purpose had to be redefined. No longer were they simply tools of war to be called upon in times of crisis. Now, they were living relics of a forgotten past, their very existence tied to the memory of a galaxy-shattering conflict. The Adeptus Titanicus, once an unshakable institution, found itself fractured. No longer a unified force serving the Emperor's vision, the Titan legions had become a collection of disparate factions, each with its own beliefs, traditions, and doctrines. Some had fallen into the chaos of heresy, while others clung desperately to the Emperor's flame. The Adeptus Mechanicus, too, had been irrevocably altered by the war. The Dark Mechanicum, those who had once been part of the same organization, had been twisted beyond recognition, serving the Chaos Gods instead of the Omnissiah. Some within the ranks of the loyal Mechanicum found themselves questioning whether the Titans were still worthy of their veneration, given the dark truths that had come to light about their creation and purpose. The struggle for control and understanding of the Titan legions was as much about identity as it was about firepower, and nowhere was this struggle more pronounced than within the Legio Ignatum, the Fire Wasps. A legion known for its unyielding devotion to the Emperor, the Legio Ignatum was a beacon of steadfast loyalty in a galaxy thrown into turmoil. But even within its ranks, questions began to emerge about the role of the Princeps and the Titans in this new era. The Fire Wasps had been instrumental in the defense of the Imperium during the heresy, their warlord and reaver Titans being the stalwart defenders of Imperial worlds. Their battle with the traitor legions had been fierce, but their true test was yet to come. As the Imperium turned inward to rebuild and consolidate its power, the Fire Wasps found themselves torn between their mission of unwavering service to the Emperor and the reality of a universe that no longer held the same certainties. The Titan legions, once the epitome of Imperial might, were now forced to reevaluate their place in a galaxy that was no longer as unified or as pure as it had once seemed. One Princeps, Valeria Crix, a leader within the Legio Ignatum, embodied the tension between the past and the present. Crix had fought alongside her Titan, Inferno, a Reaver-class Titan during the Siege of Terra, and had witnessed firsthand the horrors of the heresy. In the years that followed, as the Imperium sought to recover from its wounds, Crix found herself wrestling with the same questions that plagued her fellow Princeps. Was the war truly over? Could the Titan legions ever truly reconcile the glory of their past with the grim realities of the future? As the years passed, the Adeptus Mechanicus and the Titan legions faced new threats, this time not from within the Imperium's borders, but from the remnants of the Dark Mechanicum and the rising influence of the Xenos. The power of the warp remained a constant threat, especially as the forces of chaos sought to infiltrate the Imperium's defenses once again. The Legio Ignatum, ever vigilant, once more found themselves at the forefront of the Imperium's defenses. But Valeria Crix was no longer the unshakable commander of the past. Over time, the weight of her choices began to take its toll. Her Titan, Inferno, had suffered catastrophic damage during the fall of Cadia, a pivotal battle that saw the forces of chaos breach the Cadian Gate and begin their march toward the heart of the Imperium. In the aftermath of the battle, Crix was forced to confront the reality of what she had become, a relic of a time long past, struggling to maintain relevance in a galaxy that had moved on. Yet, even as her Titan lay broken, Valeria Crix found herself embroiled in a new conflict, one that would determine not only the future of the Legio Ignatum, but the future of the Titan legions as a whole. The rise of the Eldari, the resurgence of Orc warbands, and the growing threat of the Tyranids all served as constant reminders that the universe was a chaotic, unpredictable place. The old ways of war, defined by overwhelming strength and the supremacy of the Titan legions, seemed increasingly ill-suited to the challenges of this new age. And so, the Princeps of the Titan legions found themselves at a crossroads. Many clung to the traditions of the past, determined to uphold the legacy of the Emperor's vision, while others, like Crix, began to question whether their bond with their titans had truly been a blessing, or whether it had been a trap, one that left them beholden to a war they could no longer fight alone. The rise of the Aeldari, the enigmatic and ancient Xenos, was particularly troubling. Their advanced technologies, combined with their psychic powers, made them a formidable foe, and the Titan legions were not immune to the impact of this new threat. The Fire Wasps, still reeling from the losses of the past, now found themselves pitted against Aeldari forces in a series of deadly encounters. These engagements proved to be far more challenging than any of the Princeps had anticipated. The Aeldari's ability to manipulate the warp, coupled with their rapid strike capabilities, meant that even the mighty Titans were not immune to their attacks. In these encounters, Valeria Crix found herself struggling to maintain the discipline and order that had once been the hallmark of the Legio Ignatum. The battle strategies that had once seemed so effective were now outdated, and the Titans themselves were showing signs of strain. The Legio Ignatum's once unbreakable bonds were now being tested in ways that no one could have foreseen. The fight against the Aeldari soon revealed a profound truth. The Titan legions could no longer simply rely on the brute force of their machines. To survive, they would have to learn to adapt, to change with the times, and to find new ways to fight an enemy that was far more elusive and cunning than anything they had faced before. The age of the Titan, as it had been known, was fading. Valeria Crix, having witnessed the slow erosion of the Legio Ignatum's might, made the difficult decision to seek out new allies. She turned her attention to the Adeptus Astra Militarum, the Imperial Guard, and the new experimental Titan Forge units being created by the Adeptus Mechanicus. These new, smaller Titans, while not as powerful as their predecessors, offered a flexibility and adaptability that the old Warlord and Reaver-class Titans could no longer provide. In this new age of warfare, where speed and precision were often as important as raw firepower, Crix came to realize that the future of the Titan legions lay not in their towering, massive war machines, but in their ability to adapt, to forge new bonds between Princeps and their machines. In the wake of this realization, Valeria Crix and the Legio Ignatum began to reshape their doctrine, incorporating new tactics and technologies that emphasized agility, adaptability, and precision over sheer size and power. This new philosophy was not without its detractors, however. Many Princeps still clung to the old ways, refusing to adapt to the changing tides of war. But Crix knew that the age of unquestioning loyalty to tradition was over. The Titan legions would either evolve or become obsolete, and in the ever-darkening future of the Imperium, obsolescence was a luxury none could afford. As the Titan legions marched into the grim darkness of the far future, they were no longer just symbols of an Imperium long past. They were the living, breathing legacy of a galaxy constantly at war, and a reminder of the sacrifice, the loyalty, and the ever-evolving struggle that defined the Princeps and their Titans. The universe had entered a new era, a period where the past battles of the Titan legions were slowly fading from memory. The last great conflicts of the Horus Heresy had left the galaxy scarred and forever altered. The Adeptus Mechanicus sought to rebuild, but their victories had only resulted in deeper questions about the future of the Titan legions. The centuries that followed the heresy brought new threats and unexpected allies, but also the looming threat of stagnation and eventual extinction for the Titans that had once stood at the pinnacle of imperial might. For those who piloted the mighty machines, the reality was far more profound. The bonds between Princeps and their Titans had never been so complicated. The nature of the Adeptus Titanicus was changing. No longer were the Titans mere tools of war. They had become living monuments to the sacrifices of those who had wielded them. But with this reverence came a terrifying reality. As the ages passed, the meaning of their service grew ever more distant, and with it, their relevance. Princeps, once at the height of imperial military power, now struggled to find purpose in an imperium that had been shattered by wars, betrayals, and the inevitable march of time. Among these Princeps, there was one who would come to symbolize this delicate balance between tradition and evolution, the young Alessa Valerin of the Legio Griffonicus. The Legio Griffonicus, a Titan legion once renowned for its loyalty to the Emperor, had seen the full weight of the post-heresy collapse. Its leaders, once stalwart defenders of imperial orthodoxy, had been drawn into a struggle for survival, not only against the Xenos and Chaos, but against the very evolution of warfare itself. The world they inhabited was one in which ancient traditions collided with new realities, and it was the younger generation of Princeps, those like Alessa Valerin, who were beginning to recognize the need to reconcile these two forces. Alessa's ascent within the Legio Griffonicus had been rapid. Her tactical genius and leadership on the battlefield had quickly made her stand out. As a Princeps, she had led her Reaver-class Titan, Inferno's Wrath, in several major campaigns, most notably in the defense of the Stygian worlds. But her greatest challenge had yet to come. She was born at a time when the Titan legions were shifting, and the ancient purpose of the Titans as symbols of imperial might was increasingly questioned by the realities of a fragmented imperium. The conflicts of the past had given birth to new enemies, but they had also made clear the vulnerabilities of the Titans. Titanomachia, the age-old struggle between machines and the men who piloted them, was more relevant than ever. The rise of the Drukhari and the ongoing skirmishes with Orc warbands and Tyrannid fleets had only highlighted the slow decline of the Titan legions. The massive warlord Titans, and even the more agile Reavers, were no longer the decisive weapons they once were. The flexibility and speed of modern warfare, driven by faster-moving forces and advanced technologies, were proving to be an advantage. The Adeptus Mechanicus, now focused on preserving the Omnissiah's glory, also began questioning the place of Titans in a galaxy forever threatened by the unknown. Alessa had not been blind to these changes. While many of her fellow Princeps were content to maintain the legacy of the Titan legions as immutable institutions of war, she recognized the growing obsolescence of their current approach. The Legio Griffonicus had always been proud of their traditions, but Alessa understood the harsh truth. No amount of pride could shield them from the inevitable evolution of warfare. The Legio Griffonicus had once been a powerful force, but as Xenos technologies advanced and Chaos became more organized, the Titans began to show their age. Alessa felt the pull of a new kind of warfare, one that was nimble, adaptive, and not bound by the outdated patterns of the past. Her first test came in the battle for Alcadia. The world was on the brink of falling to a massive Tyrannid hive fleet, and the Legio Griffonicus had been called upon to defend the planet. The battle was critical. Its outcome would determine the fate of countless worlds that depended on Alcadia as a staging ground for Imperial forces. The Legio Griffonicus had been deployed to hold the line, but Alessa Valerin was struck by a revelation during the battle that would set the course for the future of the Titans. The Tyrannid advance was unlike any enemy she had faced before. The sheer speed of the hive mind and the adaptability of its creatures were making the Titan weapons less effective. Titans, once symbols of unstoppable power, were struggling to match the Tyrannid swarm's shifting tactics. In the heat of the battle, with her Reaver Titan taking fire from the monstrous Tyrannid Bio-Titans, Alessa was faced with an agonizing decision. Would she continue to fight in the old way, relying on the sheer firepower of her Titan to hold back the Tyrannid hordes, or would she adapt to the changing tide of war? After watching her Titan take severe damage and seeing her Titan legions falter, she made the fateful decision to adapt. She ordered her Legio Griffonicus to abandon their traditional heavy-handed tactics and instead focus on precision strikes and greater maneuverability. She used Imperial Guard units as decoys and engaged the Tyrannid Bio-Titans in smaller, quicker strikes. The battle was a turning point. It wasn't a victory that could be claimed in the traditional sense. Many Titans were lost, and the battle for Alcadia was long and brutal, but Alessa Valerin had found a path forward. The Legio Griffonicus managed to push back the Tyrannid hive fleet, not by sheer force of arms, but through a new understanding of what it meant to fight in this new age of war. It was a victory of adaptability, and it would become a symbol of the Titan Legion's future. Alessa Valoran became a controversial figure in the aftermath. Some hailed her as a visionary who had saved her legion, while others viewed her tactics as heretical and beneath the dignity of the Titan legions. To many, she had abandoned the old ways, choosing a path that threatened the very foundation of the Titan tradition. But in the eyes of those who had followed her, Alessa had proven that even the mightiest of machines could not remain stagnant. The war was changing, and so too must the Princeps. This battle for Alcadia became a flashpoint, a moment where the future of the Titan legions was brought into sharp focus. Many younger Princeps, like Alessa, began to see the Titans not as invincible symbols of the Emperor's will, but as living entities capable of growth and change. Their bond to the machine spirit was still sacred, but it was also malleable, subject to the needs of the moment. Those who resisted change, clinging to the idea of Titans as ancient war machines of an earlier age, found themselves outmatched by the new generation of Princeps, those who understood that, like the Imperium itself, the Titan legions must evolve. Alessa's shift in tactics sparked a larger debate within the Adeptus Titanicus. The question of tradition versus innovation became central to the future of the Titan legions. The older Princeps and many within the Adeptus Mechanicus believed that the Titans' purpose was to embody the past, to uphold the glory of the Emperor through their strength and indomitable will. Yet, the war against the Tyranids proved that even Titans could be overwhelmed if they did not evolve. As Alessa continued to lead the Legio Griffonicus, she became a leader of reform, not just within her own legion, but within the larger Adeptus Titanicus as well. The change she had initiated in the Legio Griffonicus spread to other Titan legions, inspiring them to re-examine their doctrines and combat strategies. Some embraced the new tactics wholeheartedly, while others hesitated, unsure whether the old ways were truly obsolete. But one thing was clear: the Titans would no longer be a symbol of just brute force. They would become a symbol of adaptability and the will to survive in a galaxy where change was the only constant. Alessa Valoran's legacy would go down as one of both conflict and reconciliation. She had fought to preserve the Titan legions, not by maintaining the outdated traditions of the past, but by forging a new path, one where adaptation was not only necessary, but crucial for survival. Under her leadership, the Legio Griffonicus would thrive, not as a relic of a bygone era, but as a living testament to the resilience of the Imperium and its defenders. The fate of the Titan legions was now intertwined with that of the Imperium itself. And for the Princeps, like Alessa, the future would require a new kind of courage, the courage to adapt, to embrace change, and to evolve.